I was brought up in a lovely Roman Catholic home. My mother was a Catholic. My father was a Protestant, actually. But my father made an agreement with my mother that when the children were young, he would allow them to go to the Catholic Church and we'd be brought up Catholic. So we were. When I was 17 years old, Dad began to share Jesus with me. And in a new way, a fresh way, I felt a new peace and a joy in my life that I hadn't felt before. And God moved in some special ways. And so at 17, I became a Seventh-day Adventist. I want to hasten to add, though, that my father had been a Protestant when he married my mother and later became a Seventh-day Adventist. But I never saw my father and mother argue once over religion. My mother didn't drive, my father did. My father would drive my mother to Catholic church on Sunday morning, sit in the car studying his Adventist Sabbath school lesson while she went to church. Deep respect. I can remember this, Ruth, in our home. Easter time came. Mom would fix this wonderful, well, not so wonderful today, but we thought it was beautiful ham. And would put ham and mashed potatoes and salad and corn and peas. My father would fill his plate with mashed potatoes, salad, corn, peas, pass the ham by, and say to my mother, what a beautiful meal. My mother smoked. My father did not. It was when I looked at my background in my home, I saw my father lovingly reaching out to Mom, demonstrating by example what Christ-like living was. He was not a perfect man, but he was a godly man. And there was in my life when my grandmother died, and that was an opening, and my father shared Christ with her, and Mom became a Seventh-day Adventist. I had become an Adventist before, so I was 17 years old when I became an Adventist.
Wow. And it just sounds like you've had this experience that I would argue a lot of people don't get to have with that deep sense of respect. And I mean, you think about Catholicism and Adventism being seen in the world as possibly the most opposite forms of Christian faith. And here you are within your own house having this deep sense of respect and appreciation and love for one another modeled to you. And I have a feeling that that's actually impacted your own call to ministry and your walk in it.
It impacted me greatly. I recognized right away that although God has an ideal in marriage and in life, many people don't meet that ideal ultimately. We live in a very real world. And to be able to relate to one another. And I learned also from my father that there was a time when he knew that he had to witness very strongly to my mother, not only by his lifestyle, but by sharing biblical truth. And what had happened is my grandmother was like a 2-pack-a-day smoker, and she eventually died of lung cancer. And I remember when my mother came home, I was at home, and she came home that day just crying and said, she's gone. My father came home from work, and I didn't know what happened until years later, but he went into the room with my mother, put his arms around her, and she cried and said, you know, Mother suffered so much with cancer, but now she's suffering in purgatory. And my father said to her, Gloria, said very little to you because I didn't want to offend you, but let me share with you the truth about death. And he shared about the beautiful peace and the sleep of death, and that her grandmother, my grandmother, wasn't in purgatory, burning between heaven and hell, suffering. My mother was greatly comforted with that. That was like on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, Ruth. And then on Sabbath, my mother got up, took a shower, put her best dress on, fixed her hair. And my father said, well, where are you going today? She said, I'm going to church with you. And he was the local church. Walked in with my mother on her arm that day. And, you know, people were weeping because it was such a moving experience. And she didn't miss Sabbath after that. It was at that moment in her life when she was open. And, you know, John Wesley calls that prevenient grace. He says that in everybody's life, there's going to be a time of openness and receptivity. So when I'm counseling with people like who have teenagers who maybe are on rebelling or they're not interested in church, I say to them, look, demonstrate Christ in your lifestyle. And when you do that, watch the way God works. I remember I was 17 years old, and I was playing on a basketball team, and we were a very good team, but we had nobody that would coach us. We just argued, and we lost 4 games in a row, and we were 0-4, and it came in the newspaper, you know, this team, and we were so embarrassed. And I came home and said to my father, you know, Dad, I'm so embarrassed. We lost 4 games in a row, and Dad said to me, well, who's your coach? I said, nobody will coach us. Now, you have to understand, my interest in sports, none. But he knew ball, and he said, I'll coach you. And he began coaching us, and we qualified as the last place for the major city tournament. It was on a Friday night.
Wow.
And Dad said to me, Mark, you know, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and I will not be at your game Friday night. I'll be home studying my Bible, my Sabbath school lesson. But he said, I want you to go, and immediately after the game, call me and tell me what it was like. because he knew that, I was not an Adventist at the time, but he was very smart because he wanted me to come home after the game, not go out with the guys. So immediately after the game, I didn't have cell phones in those days, and I put my dime or quarter, whatever it was, in the payphone, and I called him, and he said, "Hey, that's so exciting. Come home and tell me about it." I came home and told him, and he just sat and listened and asked questions. So he had that balance of standing firm for Christ and principle, but reaching out to a wayward son. And it was that influence. We worked together when I was 17, because Dad, by that time, had a factory, and I was working in his factory. And he shared with me because he knew I was going to go off to college, and that just broke my heart. And the Adventist message made so much sense to me, and it gave me much peace and hope that I became a Seventh-day Adventist.
Wow. Your example, I think we're living in a world now, and especially, I mean, it's been like this in the past as well, but I find that there's so much pressure on all of society, and I think sometimes it trickles into our church experience as well, whereas people that are meant to reach out to others, we feel this compelling pressure and this push to minister with haste, but without real recognition of the needs of others in that time. And you've shared a story here that's obviously impacted your entire life, and your approach as well. And when you were sharing about your grandmother and your mum's experience, in my own loss, I lost my mother a couple of years ago, and just knowing that piece about where she was and what was going on for her, which turns out to be nothing because she's resting, was such a beautiful, you've referred to this peace and this hope, and this assurance. And that's something that's really special that your dad was, as you said, was able to share in a really important time. I wanted to ask you, because you're stepping now, obviously your dad's been ministering to you as a father, but also sharing truth as you did with your mum. When did you first feel or sense a call to ministry, and what did that look like?
For me, it was no flash of light. It was no overwhelming time of, I just sensed and saw that this was it. I think the difference between an impulse and impression is this. An impulse is something that's flighty. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow. An impression is a growing, constant awareness that God wants you to do something you could do nothing else. And so at the end of my senior year in high school, I began to sense the leading of God to ministry. I began to sense that the Holy Spirit was moving in my life. But that didn't happen overnight. It was a period of weeks, a period of months, and the impression became deeper. And it was at a point, Ruth, where I could do nothing else. And I have counseled many young men or young ladies who want to go into God's work, and I have said to them, if you can do anything else, do it. The call to ministry is a life call, and it's a life commitment. Take your time, think about this, pray about it, and let God impress you, because it's a commitment of service for the rest of your life. And it was a conviction for me that took place over a period of time, not a flighty impulse.
Did you ever feel as though you felt that, yes, God was leading you, but you yourself were hesitant? Or did you feel like you actually wanted to make that jump?
I don't think I was hesitant. I was uncertain. And I think there's a different thing. I was not sure initially. And, I think there are really four aspects of guidance. First, you pray and you listen to the voice of the Spirit in your life. You study the Word of God and see if there's anything in the Bible that helps to guide you for your decision. Thirdly, you counsel with others. And so I began to counsel with others and ask them, what do you think? And fourthly, you look for the open doors of providence. And how is God working? Somebody said wisdom is finding out which way God is moving and moving with him. And so for me, the most convincing things in this particular decision to go into ministry were, one, the deep conviction God was giving me, and two, people that I trusted, that I counseled with, said that they really encouraged me in that area.
Is there somebody that stands out to you, maybe an example of a pastor or an evangelist, that you felt really spoke into your life in that season?
At that particular time, now I've had many mentors since then, but at that particular time, the pastor that baptized me, Pastor Marion Kidder, was always a real blessing to me. I had a pastor who I got to know as well, who was pastoring. I was living in Connecticut. He was pastoring in Hartford, Connecticut. His name was O.J. Mills, and he was a real influence in my life. So those two men were very positive influences in my life early in those days. And then later, Pastor Ron Halverson became the pastor of our local church, and he was an influence. So early in my ministry, those three men were really a powerful influence.
That's beautiful. So when people talk about ministry, I know we have Avondale College here in Australia, and as an undergraduate degree, young men and women can go in, or men and women of any age can go in and study theology and ministry and chaplaincy. But what I notice about you is that you've stepped quite heavily into evangelism, or I guess quite a public figure in a sense for our church. How did that come about? Was there a transition time? How did that occur?
Ruth, I was pastoring for a number of years, smaller churches and then some that were a little bigger, and working at a very small supporting ministry school through the conference in the South, a school called Wildwood. I was employee of the conference, and I was there at the school teaching some in evangelism. And I had held a couple of evangelistic meetings in that area and sensed that God was leading me into full-time evangelism. And my wife and I, and again, I don't want to suggest that God always works this way, but he did with us. I came home one night and talked to my wife, Teeny, about it. And I said, I think God is leading us to evangelism. I was holding meetings in a tent and then holding meetings in a small auditorium. I was young. And as I talked to Teeny about it, we prayed, and we just earnestly prayed that night. Now, again, I don't want to give the impression that this always happens, but the next day, I got a call from the ministerial secretary of the Southern New England Conference in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island area. And he said to me, we were in our office yesterday thinking about a new conference of evangelists, and your name came into our mind. Would you be interested? And I, after my prayer experience that night and that experience, and I said to him, I really believe God is leading us, but I have certain conditions. Because I recognized even back then that society was moving toward a more secular, postmodern society. So most American evangelists at that point were doing like 3 weeks of evangelistic meetings or 4. And I wanted to look at a different model, a model where we came in and spent 3 months, 6 months in those cities, a model where we worked with church members in prayer and Bible studies, and a model where we reached out in a multifaceted approach with stress management classes and natural lifestyle cooking and exercise classes and family life. And also I wanted to work in a model where I worked with a team of young people and that I would recruit them. And so the conference was excited about that model. So I went into evangelism there in Southern New England and worked there, then went from there to the Chicago area to work with Andrews University and to train in evangelism while we did evangelism in the Master Divinity program, and then went, of course, to and had an opportunity to work in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, England. I was a ministerial secretary of the Trans-European Division and worked in socialist countries, Poland, Hungary, Yugoslavia, then later Russia. And then at that point went to It Is Written and began to hold a lot of satellite evangelistic meetings. And then in 2000, the General Conference. And so I've been at the General Conference now for almost 17 years. It's just amazing how it goes.
And in a sense, there is evangelism. Ministry, when I asked earlier, when did you sense that call to ministry? We tend to think of it as that small box of ministering to a small or large church or a community and moving around every 4 or 5 years, depending on where you are. But ministry can be so much more. I could be talking to somebody right now that is ministered in Papua New Guinea doing missionary work. Or for your example, having done so many different things, but with what seems to me is this deep love for people and just a recognition of where they seem to be at and their needs at the time. You've mentioned things like the cooking classes or family dynamics and assisting people with the actual perceived needs that they have first, and then being able to bring the gospel to them, which sounds a lot to me like Christ's method alone.
Yeah, I love that statement in Ministry of Healing. Christ's method alone will bring success in reaching the people. He ministered among men. We have followed that method. We believe that as you meet the felt needs of people, their hearts open for you to meet their deeper spiritual needs. We don't meet the felt needs as a method to manipulate them. We meet their felt needs because we care for them, we're interested in them, we love them, and because Christ created them in his image. But as you meet the felt needs of people, God opens the door, he opens hearts, he opens minds for the sharing of the gospel. And we have seen this so many times here. When Teeny and I were going to retire in 2010, which we have not done yet, the church books may say I'm retired, but I think I'm working more now than we did before. But we moved out into an area that had no Seventh-day Adventist church. It had, it's a gated community, has a couple golf courses, and we live in a little retirement section of that. But they have some very well-to-do homes. Many people who work for the government in Washington, D.C. live in our area. And it had no church in our immediate community. There was a little church about 15, 20 minutes away, and we went to that little 40-member church and then began working here. We've now built a beautiful church, a facility where we have our church. We have a Living Hope School of Evangelism. We have a nice church of, when before COVID, 180, 200 people come each Sabbath, and many young professionals. This last Sabbath, 5 couples in the church that were not Seventh-day Adventists, but all professional couples who are studying. But the interesting thing is we've had between 700 and 900 non-Seventh-day Adventist visitors come to our church, Ruth, in the last 4 years, between 7 and 900. COVID on Monday nights regularly, we'd have health programs. We'd have stress management, exercise classes, wellness classes, cooking classes. Tuesday nights, we had a Bible class and that people came to. So we have an ongoing outreach into the community. At Christmas, we have all kind of Christmas programs that we run, concerts, and invite people to come in for maybe herbal teas and some little homemade cookies and come to Christmas programs. So the whole philosophy is you win a friend, then you win a Christian friend, then you win a Seventh-day Adventist Christian friend. But we try to build as many relationships in the community as we possibly can so that the community becomes aware of who we are and what we're doing. And the essence of evangelism is not friendship alone, but neither is it proclamation alone. A lot of people say, well, make friends. Well, no, I can make friends on the golf course. I can make friends at a bowling alley. I can make friends in a variety of places. But there comes a point where you share Jesus. There comes a point where you open the Bible and study with them. And so our life is wrapped up with people. Jesus was wrapped up with people. The reason for programs is not for program's sake, but it's for people's sake. So even now, in the busyness of our lives, with everything we're doing, we have a school of evangelism here. We have a media ministry. We have a pastor's retreat center that we just bought. That's about 7 minutes from the church where pastors come for retreats. But with all of that, we still give Bible studies. I mean, I have each Monday night, I have marriage counseling that I do. And so we're interested, our lives are wrapped up in people. We believe that Christ died for people, and that's what we're interested in.
And it's been something that's been on my heart a lot as a deep side is there. Just about the fact that a lot of us talk about ministering to the needs of secular people, but we have sometimes quite a narrow perception of what that means. And you've shared that there's a community that you dwell in and that you spend time with that on the outside of things seems to not really need help in life, so to speak, but you've been able to step in and say, well, you know, there's things like loneliness, or there's things like past hurts, or there's things like marriage struggles that you can deeply minister to. And it sounds like it's not only been a blessing for your community, but also for you. I mean, you've stepped into that since retiring, which is, an incredible statement of, I guess, your faithfulness, but also the passion that Jesus has in your life and how that's reflected for you.
You know, Ruth, I think one has to evaluate their community. If we were in an inner city community, I would probably run a food bank. I'd probably run a very extensive program to be sure people had clothes. We might run an after-school program for children who need tutorial help and extra help with math. I might run a computer class. So that would be I might run a job skills program. In the community we live, it's a very upmarket community. What people are interested in here, we took a look at a demographic study when we first came. They're interested in family, they're interested in their health, and they're interested in moral, spiritual values. They may not be interested in studying the Bible, but they are interested in ethical, moral values. So we concentrated in those 3 areas based on the community that we live in.
Yeah, and that's so important. I mean, it sounds like you've lived and ministered to such a multitude of communities. I mean, you mentioned earlier as well that you spent some time actually mentoring and working with young people in Andrews University. How was that experience for you?
I love it. We do it today. So
Yeah.
now today, I was at Chicago for 6 years from 1979 to 1985 before going to Europe. And so we taught then Master of Divinity students. But when I went to Europe, we'd always have long-term field schools of evangelism, 3 months, 6 months, where young people were with us. Early in our ministry, we had a lot of young people living in our home. I would have my own family and 6, 7 young people in our home at one time. Um, Now we have our School of Evangelism here, and we it's the way it works is we have a 5-day intensive symposium. It starts on a Sunday night, goes to a Thursday night. Typically, we do that 7 times a year. So we've had 250 pastors come to us from the Sunday night to the Thursday night. In addition to that, we now have a pastor's retreat center. We can take, we can sleep 13. It's beautiful. It's like a 5-star hotel. We have 2 saunas. We have a jacuzzi. We have a cold tub. We have massage rooms, wonderful food. And so pastors come there and they spend time there getting physically, mentally, emotionally rejuvenated. And then we mentor them. We spend time with them. In addition to that, we Southern Adventist University, and they have a master's degree program. Their students can take 9 hours of academic credit with us. So in the summertime for 2 weeks, they send their students. We're working with another supporting ministry called Heartland College, and they bring their students to us as well. So what our whole goal is, even now, is work with a lot of young people. We have young people on our team now. I have 1, 2, 3 young people. We rent a apartment for them, and then they work on most of them are working on our media ministry team, because our media ministry has just exploded now. It's some of my DVDs now, they will be on YouTube. 500,000, 600,000, 800,000 views, many of them 100,000. Just did one last week, and I think I looked at it this morning, it was 107,000 views. So we are really working hard on digital media, and that's an area. We also have a university. In our university, we have 150 courses. It's an online university. We have 150 courses, and our students are taking about 25,000, 26,000 classes now. Much of what we do is all tuition free. We do charge a little bit for classes in our university. Many of them are free, but some are charged a little bit. But when pastors come to us, like from Sunday to Thursday, we don't charge anything. We just say, you come. If they want to eat, they pay a little bit for the meals, but that's it. At our retreat center, we don't charge anything. We provide everything for them. And we just tell them, if you want to make a donation, you can do that. And we do better that way. Have people coming, and then they just get so excited about the ministry that they say, look, what can we do for you? So Jesus said it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. So when we give, people say, how do you run this operation? It's a huge operation. How do you do this with no subsidy from the church? We don't get 1 penny from the church's subsidy. How do you do this? And I tell them, when you give, it's a residual effect. It says, shall be given, pressed down and run over, So we believe that God is in it and he's able to take care of it.
And I think as well, how it says in the story of Abraham, he was blessed to be a blessing, and we experience both God's blessing to us so that we can bless others, but also the blessing of actually being a blessing to others. And when people are so thankful to us for what we do, I always step back and say, no, thank you. Which seems to be the case for you. You seem to have such a, we're talking about calm and peace and hope, and you seem, the Australian word, I don't know if it's really stated much in America around the world, but we say that we just seem stoked, or I guess excited or delighted.
I'll look that one up in Webster's dictionary.
Yeah, I don't know how it's going to go, but yeah, we definitely use that statement. I wanted to shift just a little bit, because we've been talking about ministering to, I guess, a community that you're dwelling in, and you've also mentioned that you worked in, socialist countries and things like that. Now, when I first became a Christian again as an adult, it was about 5 years ago, and we were doing this mock trial in a church in England, pretending that we were on trial for being Adventists. and they were testing, I guess it was fun, testing our knowledge in scripture and understanding. And some of the students at the back were whipping out this little red book called Studying Together.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. You've published this guide on connecting with people from other faiths and perspectives, and it's widely used in the church. There was at one point, I think, an app. What do you find the most challenging when it comes to reaching people from other religions or just other perspectives?
Let's suppose you were a Muslim or a Hindu, and I approached you and I said, Ruth, let me tell you about Christianity. You may put up your hands, but once you learn I am a Seventh-day Adventist, if you are a Muslim, and I say to you, Ruth, let me share some wonderful things that we have in common. Tell me the things that are important to you. And you say to me, well, one thing that is important is praying 5 times a day. And I say to you, prayer is very important to me as well. Say to me, it's very important to keep my body. I don't use alcohol. I don't eat pork. I say, that's a wonderful thing. Neither do we. One of the things I think that many people make a mistake in is they start with they don't have in common with others rather than starting with things that they do have in common. Our little book, Studying Together, I start each chapter on varying religions by these are the things we have in common. These are the differences, and these are approaches. So I think you start always where you can agree, not where you disagree. If somebody says to me, if I'm dealing with, for example, a Baptist, and they say, my grandmother just died, and I'm so thankful she's in heaven looking down at me. What is my comment to them? My comment is, let me straighten you out about where your grandmother is. I say to them is, what a hope we have in Jesus. What a hope we have in Jesus. You don't always have to correct people. So I find that when we're dealing with people of other religions, I want to get to know them as individuals. I want to understand what they believe so I can have a strategy kindly to share Christ with them.
And I think, there's a lot of people that sincerely would take a different approach to what you've shared. You made the example and I giggled there for a moment. It was probably more than a giggle. Because I've seen it so commonly happen when somebody does pass away. I've got a friend who's has family and their grandmother has just passed away, and a similar thing came up, the exact same conversation over dinner, and I just sat there nodding without saying anything, because the person that is sitting across from you, and Mark, you've kind of shared this, we share what's in common. And what's in common, for instance, in that example, is that we have a hope that we get to see our loved ones again.
Exactly.
And when, that book itself has been very helpful for me, because I came and I had an experience when I first came back to the church where I was around a culture of legalism that I think it comes from fear. There's this fear of this pressure to quickly, convert, and this fear of, losing people that are important to God. And it's not necessarily out of aggression or frustration, but we do sometimes step ahead. And so this approach that you're talking of sharing what's in common seems to be, it calms both the person that we're ministering with, but also our own hearts, and allows us to experience that patience that stems from God.
I call it earning the right to be heard, developing. So if I'm meeting with a Hindu or Muslim, or a person who is a Christian but not Adventist persuasion, if we can focus on what is common, if I can build a bond of trust, I earn the right to be heard. Then comes a point in the conversation, not in that immediate conversation, but in the friendship over a period of weeks, months, could be longer, where I might say to them, may I share with you another perspective on that? I love the may I principle because you respect the person's freedom of choice. May I share with you what the Bible says about that topic, what the ancient scriptures say? It may be helpful. And so I try to bring people to a point where they are open and receptive to hear biblical passages of truth without offending them. Now, some people you're going to offend. There's no way not. Jesus offended some people. They don't like it. Some of the religious leaders of his day, he offended them so much they wanted to So you are going to offend some people. So I'm not concerned that I offend them. I'm concerned that I offend them because of my tactlessness and my attempt to put pressure on them. If they're offended after I've gently shared with them at the right time, that's a different issue.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're stemming from a place of love and respect for the journey that they've been on to even hold those perspectives in the first place. We have no idea why the backgrounds. I mean, I had no idea, and maybe I should, but I didn't know that you grew up as a Catholic, and so, and neither did I assume at the same time that that you grew up as an Adventist. And so we all have these journeys and these stories, and I guess this is what this interview and conversations in general should be about, is getting to know one another and being able to journey together, even if just for a brief moment as well.
Right.
You spend a lot of time with people. You were mentioning that you would have your family and then 7 other students at a time, sometimes, living with you. How do you like to spend time when you're on your own, when you finally get that downtime?
I have a lot of things that I love to do. Nature is I'm very fond of nature. So we live in a place where I can go out and walk on the trails. I was out this morning. And so when I have downtime, nature is something I enjoy. I enjoy the beach. I've always enjoyed the beach. If it's quiet, I don't go to crowded beaches, don't like them at all. But there are places I can go and to swim. I enjoy that very much. I enjoy riding my bike, love that. There was a time in my life that I'd enjoyed playing golf. So yeah, we have many different things that we do. I would say outdoor activities, hiking. We just love hiking. If we go to the mountains and hike, biking, riding our bikes. And when you have grandkids, you stay young. And so we very much. So yeah, those outdoor activities are something, and we like gardening. Yeah, very much so. We had a garden last year, and if we can spend time in our garden, we certainly do that.
Yeah, and it sounds like such a good antidote to, I mean, you would know doing so much work in digital ministry and being in, artificial light and that kind of thing, even in days past of evangelistic series. And it's just nice to step back into what God has created rather than what man is, putting together in a lot of senses. So exactly. I can see that brings real joy to you. Yeah. And is there anything else that you feel that you're passionate about other than ministry, maybe a special hobby, or you've mentioned bike riding and golfing?
I would say reading. I love to read, and constantly every day reading. I'm reading through the Conflict of the Ages series now, just for my own personal enjoyment. And this year already I've read Patriarchs and Prophets. I'm almost through Prophets and Kings. I've read Desire of Ages. So the first 6 months of the year I'll read Patriarchs and Prophets, Prophets and Kings, Desire of Ages, Acts of the Apostle, Great Controversy. So reading is something I really enjoy, and broadly reading. Reading about the political situation, reading about history, reading about culture, background, peoples. So I would say that's one of the things that when I relax, I love to read if I'm not outdoors doing things outside. So yeah, I really enjoy that. I enjoy very much staying abreast with what my children are interested in. I have 3 children, and just plug into them. Like I talked to all 3 of them yesterday, and so we're always on the phone sharing. My grandkids, my granddaughter FaceTime with us last night. And so I'd say that what gives me the greatest joy in life is interacting with my family, interacting with my friends. The other thing that I enjoy, I think, before COVID, of course, was travel. Almost every year, I guided tours to the Reformation, to the Middle East, to the land, it's Turkey area, 7 churches, to Britain, and so English Reformation, European Central Reformation, Luther's time, Bible lands, Israel, 7 churches, island of Patmos. So there are groups that I've taken, and I look back, and that's something, Ruth, I really, really enjoy. Just the background of it, the history, the culture of it, and very, very much so.
Yeah. And I know those places, there's, the lineage journey. A friend of mine was involved in that ministry, kind of recording some of the locations for the 7 churches. Is there a particular place, I guess, a modern culture, because we can't really step back in time, 2,000 years back and see the legitimate culture of those places, but traveling around those areas, is there a culture or place in particular that you really appreciate or value?
I would say there are a few. I lived in England for 5 years, and St. Albans, anytime I can go to St. Albans, that little town where the division is, just very, very special to me. It's a very, very special of that. I love Greek culture. We've had a number of tours to Greece, and I just really enjoy it. In South America, Brazil, oh, it's just active and a lot vibrant, and it's a Brazilian culture. So it's hard for me. Africa, I've always enjoyed Africa as well. When I look, I guess I would put it this way. I enjoy the places the most where I am. If I'm in the Philippines, I love it. Indonesia, China, I just look back over it. But I would say of all those places, probably St. Albans, England is just a special place to me.
Yeah, England was actually the place that I came back to the faith, and there's something very, you're talking about small towns, the small villages, and the winding roads, and the clear seasons. I guess for me as an Australian, very clear seasons was really special. But yeah, even just I find, you're mentioning going to the Philippines, even the simple act for me of going to a shop and seeing how they set out their aisles and the labeling and packaging on their grocery items speaks so much of a culture in a lot of ways. So I've got a question here, and these questions are, you and I are having this conversation, but it also comes from, different community members as well. And one of them is that, and you were mentioning books as well. You have, according to Wikipedia, you've published over 74 books. Now, do you ever check a Wikipedia page that, some people Google themselves, Mark? Are you a vain person? Have you?
I don't Google myself very much.
Is 74 books, in the ballpark of how much you've
written?
It
is. It could be more now. That could be. But, and I'll tell you how that happens. A lot of the questions, people say, how in the world do you ever write 74 books? Well,
yes.
This is the way it happens. First, I'm old enough, I'm 50, so I've been in ministry 53 years. So when you're in 53 years, you better have something background. So if I live to 100, I will, I will have even more. But seriously, the way I do it is this. I just wrote a book, Hope for Troubled Times. It's on the pandemic. So for example, here are some of the chapters. The Ultimate Vaccine is one chapter, and I talk about vaccines. Then I talk about Christ is the ultimate vaccine for sin. PPE, personal protective equipment, and the best for the Christian is prayer, Bible study, etc. Then another chapter is how to deal with worry, fear, and anxiety. Another one is on pandemics, pestilences, and prophecy. So I'll tell you the story on that. The General Conference called me March, I think it was last year. They said, Mark, we need a new book, Hope for Troubled Time. We need a book on the pandemic, the COVID-19, but we need this in about 6 weeks because of the translations around the world. Can you write a book in 6 weeks? Well, here's the point. It was easy for me. And the reason it was easy for me is I was preaching those sermons. And I preach manuscript sermons. So every one of my sermons is about 3,500 words to 3,800 words. So, and I don't preach out of an outline. I write everything out of manuscript, and it takes me about 15 hours to prepare a sermon. So I already had of the, say, whatever, I already forget the number of chapters, but say there's 13 chapters in the book. I already had like 9 or 10 of them written because they were my manuscript I've been preaching. So somebody calls me and says, Mark, we need a new book on the second coming of Christ. I look back over 100 sermons and pull 8 sermons that are already manuscript on the second coming of Christ, refine them. We need something on grace. I look back. So every week that I preach, I am writing a new chapter of a book. So that's how I'm able to do it, because I take advantage of the time that I'm using to prepare a sermon to make that a chapter of a book. Then you can shorten it, you can lengthen it, etc. So that's the secret of that.
No, it's actually so smart. I remember last year during COVID, in fact, I was asked to preach for my church plant, and we had to do it via Zoom as well. And I remember writing this out, and because I was staring straight at the screen, I had the manuscript, as you said, just there. But I reflected and realized that it's good content for an article or like a devotional thought or something. So, you've made it so much easier for me now. I'm looking at writing my first book. So
Great.
Yeah, maybe
That's
maybe
exciting.
74 books later.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'll get time with the way that the world's going, but you've mentioned the Hope for Troubled Time, and I know that there's also videos available for that on the Seventh-day Adventist Church YouTube channel, which is awesome. And it seems like, you mentioned that you were meant to retire in 2010, but you and Teeny just keep going, keep going. Why aren't you kicking back and just stepping into Adventism, retire, whatever the retirement version is of Adventism?
I think there's a couple of reasons. We do take time. We do, when you get older, you don't have the energy you had when you're younger, and I notice that. But we continue to minister, and we minister. I think our ministry right now is as broad as it ever has been, because we can use digital ministry, we can use a variety of other things as well. So, but there's something within us, there's a passion within us. I feel that if I were doing nothing for Christ and simply tried to retire and put my feet in the ocean water and sat there week after week. Now, occasionally it's not too bad, to tell you the truth. But,
yeah, sounds really nice.
but if I didn't do anything, I think that would be my death now. For me, activity is really important, but again, we do have to cut back. We can't. You don't have the energy at 75, 76 that you do when you're 40. So we try to live a more balanced life, spend time certainly with our children and grandchildren, but we try to maximize our time. So for example, let's suppose I'm preaching on Sabbath. 1, I've written a manuscript, so it's going to be a chapter in a book. 2, I preach to my local congregation. 3, we put that live that particular day that I'm preaching. So last Sabbath, I preached a sermon on the resurrection because it was Easter. 10,000 people watched it immediately. So then take that. I can also, the next Sunday, take that same material, sit in a webinar, and then that webinar becomes a class, which we put on our university site. So what I'm trying to do now, Ruth, is maximize what I do, to make what I do more reaching, more important, not more far-reaching than simply having to work 7 days a week indefatigably, or 6 days and take 1 day off. Now, although I try to step back and relax some, I try to focus, and I ask myself, how can I maximize my energies so that it has a greater impact for Christ?
Yeah, it sounds like you're working smarter rather than harder, which is a lesson that all of us need to learn, because obviously Jesus took time off, and he had a limited amount of time in ministry, but even now is still ministering, just in a different way to how he was when he was spending those 3.5 years deep in the trenches, in a sense. So you've got the book, the series which just went live. You're preaching every weekend or so, or ministering through this school. Is there anything else that you haven't mentioned to us yet that you're working on, or like maybe considering that you'll venture into in the future?
Right. I want to clarify, I don't pastor our church, so I don't preach every week.
Right. Yeah.
We do have a pastor who works there. A couple of things I'm really excited about. I'm working on a project called The Three Cosmic Messages, which is just wrote a book on the three angels' messages, and I just wrote 13 sermons. I think, and pastors are using those now. People can go on a site called threecosmicmessages.com. They can download the sermons, download the graphics. We think that they're some of the latest graphics. Then also, my sister is an educator. She did a doctorate at Boston University. She has taught for many years. She's been principal of Adventist schools. She joined us, a small team I'm working with, about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. She had been the principal of a particular school. And she's taught both in secular universities and Adventist, and her specialty is curriculum development. She has developed a curriculum from the kindergarten children to the high school children. Wow. Are the Three Angels Messages. It's a 2-week curriculum. It has teacher's guides. It has books appropriate for each age. There's multiple books in the series. There's videos. There's interactivity. And so we're really excited about that project. We really believe that the essence of Adventism has to do with Revelation 14, rightly understood. And many people think it's mystic symbols and cryptic images and beasts, but they don't see Jesus in it. And so we really, with a whole team of us, worked on that. And we're really excited about that project. That's one thing we're excited about. We're excited about expanding our internet presence and our YouTube presence. We think that that has real potential. And although I don't preach every week, I do try to do a new YouTube program every week. And so we're really encouraged about that. Our Pastor's Retreat Center is just coming into its own. We've only had it for a year, but that I think has real potential for the future because many pastors are tired, they're worn out. They want to come to a place where they can get counsel, guidance, and they can rest and get some good food. And so we're encouraged about that. There's so many things, Ruth, that we're encouraged about.
Here's a question that's kind of related to that, and it's kind of just popped into my mind. I have like so my background is that I do counseling, and so observing as I do get to travel, I guess within Australia and visit different churches as well, I see a lot of pastors that are working really hard and contributing in a lot of ways to their local church and to ministry as well. What is your suggestion for pastors or ministers or evangelists to avoid burning out or experiencing spiritual fatigue?
I think there are a few things that immediately come to my mind. The first is you become spiritually fatigued easier if your devotional life is weak. The stronger your devotional life, your Bible study and prayer life, the more you will be fueled by Christ to give. So what I would say to young pastors particularly is put emphasis on your personal spiritual devotional life. That's number one. Number two, you become more burned out when you are physically and emotionally fatigued. Put emphasis on exercise and a good diet, adequate sleep. So spiritual and physical health contribute to a lack of burnout. High stress jobs where you get up in the morning and you start running, and I don't mean jogging, I mean running from one place to the other, will tend to burn you out more quickly. So prayer, Bible study, meditation. Secondly, is the physical aspects of your life, getting adequate water, getting adequate rest, get good diet. But there's a number of other elements. A third element is this. Many pastors see a dichotomy between ministry and family. So there is this dichotomy where they are in ministry, but yet their family, they say, I feel so guilty because I'm spending this time in ministry, I'm not spending time with my family. If that is your view, you're always going to be conflicted. So, but if you have a different view, and that is that ministry is a team ministry. So even if a wife works outside of ministry, she's not employed by the church, which is most of the cases today. In the industrialized, developed world, most pastors' wives will have some job. What I counsel pastors to do is this: sit down with your wife, find the area of her gifts and skills. If it's in cooking, let her be involved encourage her to be involved in the church in using nutrition classes. If it's with children's ministry, encourage her to be involved in children's ministry. If it's hospitality, encourage her to be involved in greeting. In other words, husbands and wives discuss together each of their roles in the local congregation, and they navigate that. The same with children. We have young people, 13 years old, 14 years old, that we've taught to run camera. They have to be responsible, but some of them are great at doing it. They really take it responsibly. We have other young people that participate in a praise team and lead out in worship with us. So the whole concept is, particularly for pastors, that you look like what our pastor's son, for example, is going to turn 13. Now, he is 13 now, and he's running camera. And he just comes to church every Sabbath. He just loves it, the technology. So the idea is, find a collaborative team ministry within your family. The aspect is you tend to burn out more if ministry becomes problem-centered rather than mission-oriented. And that's, I think, a key point. If your ministry is problem-centered, if you're looking at all the problems at the church, you're going to burn out much easier. But if mission is the top of your church board item, if outreach and what fuels you is seeing people come to Christ and seeing them, seeing what God is doing and hearts converted. So here are four things. One, deep spirituality will keep you from burning out. Two is adequate physical exercise and a good diet and rest. Three, sharing with your family your own heart, desire, and ministry, and finding roles for each family member. And four, being central on mission. I think those things can be helpful to pastors.
Yeah, and it sounds like those things that you and Tia have had and probably journeyed in and maybe at some moments possibly even struggled with.
Oh, sure.
The nature
Sure.
of two humans coming together.
Right.
But it's such good guidance for young people that are at university and obviously meeting people of the opposite sex and exploring the idea of finding a life partner. And I think it's such a good question to ask, like, how are we going to approach these four areas? How are we going to work as a team, as one flesh on this?
Right.
Look, this conversation has been such a blessing for me, and I hope for you to be able to share just some of your, I guess, your areas of understanding, and to share wisdom. I hope that's been a blessing for you, Mark, as well.
Yes, it's been enjoyable. Just a very relaxing conversation. I really appreciate it, Ruth. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I just have a quick question as well. If there's one last piece of advice that you can give for a young person starting out in this broad area called ministry, what would it be?
I think if the one thing I could say to them is, we never will succeed unless we give ourselves permission to fail. Don't be too hard on yourself early. Early in ministry, there's something I call skill building. My first sermons were quite weak, but I was building a skill. I kept writing them. My first evangelistic was in a tent. We didn't baptize anybody. But I was learning, building a skill. First time I ever ran a stress management program, my knees were knocking. I was so stressed out to run that program, but I was learning. First programs I ever did with It Is Written television, Pastor George Vandeman, couldn't use them. We had spent thousands of dollars on them. My programs were so poor we couldn't use them. We had to throw them away. But he got me a mentor in Hollywood who taught me how to do television. So as I look back over my ministry, when I'm talking to young people, don't be afraid to do something because you think you're going to fail. The worst failure is you didn't do it. Always push yourself beyond. If you feel content in what you're able to do and capable of what you're able to do, you're not doing enough. Always take another step. I knew nothing about TV, took that step. Knew nothing about satellite ministry, took that step. Knew very little about YouTube ministry. So I think what I say to young pastors is, don't be hard on yourself. The worst failure is the failure not to do. And you do it and you go do it again and again and again. And you let the Holy Spirit lead you and guide you and strengthen you. And you build this skill, then you build another skill and you build another skill. And pretty soon, the things that were hard for you become easier for you. And pretty soon you're able to have a broad-based ministry that touches thousands of lives for the kingdom.